It is my honor and my privilege to have Rita Coolidge here today. Is my mic live? Does everyone hear? I'm going to shut up so she can do the talking. She has a beautiful voice. She performed for us last night, for which we are so appreciative. She has an amazing history, amazing life story. And we're just going to have a little fun with this, and I want you guys to feel free to ask her questions. So, Rita, let's do this.
Okay. All right.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about your amazing career. There's the little bit that almost feels like when you read the book, it's almost like by mistake, like it should have been somebody else but you, or you're just very modest.
Are you, we talked about this last night. I think that Laurie, are you talking about my sister, Priscilla? I had an older sister who was killed 2 years ago. She was shot and killed by her husband, who then turned the gun on himself. But she was my best friend, my songwriting partner. She was everything to me. And she was born with this huge, big voice. And when she was a little girl, talent scouts came to this little town where we lived and wanted to take her to Hollywood, and she would have been the next Shirley Temple, except bigger, I'm sure. But she had a big voice and went to the University of Tennessee on a Grace Moore scholarship. And when she was 16, she was remarkable. She studied opera, and I always felt like I was in her shadow, and that she was going to be she would be a huge star. And I think she thought so too. But we continued to work together and sing until she passed.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the Walela, the hummingbird, your Cherokee past, and how you wound up working with her on that album.
Well, we actually did 2 albums. She's talking about Walela, which was my sister, my niece Laura, and myself formed a Native American women's singing group after working with Robbie Robertson on a project called the Native Americans. So we always called Robbie our fairy godfather because he encouraged us to join and start writing the songs and recording. And the music from this group, Walela, which in Cherokee means hummingbird, which is my Indian name. Because my sister used to say that I was like a hummingbird because I was all over the place. So we formed this group and made these albums, and they simply took wings. The music was magical. It was unbearable love making it, which was the title of one of the records, because when you go in the studio with your family, it's a lot of problems, a lot of egos. But the music was wonderful, and I miss her so much, and the music.
Yeah. So let's talk about your first big hit and when you heard yourself on the radio.
Which one?
When you heard yourself on the radio and sort of when you kind of broke out as a...
Is this higher and higher?
Yes,
well,
yeah. It's a great story.
I recorded several albums with A&M, and I think I had done 3 albums with them before the album Anytime, Anywhere was released, and I had my first big hit record. And actually, I had just a few months prior to this record, I'd lost a child. I'd lost a baby in 7 months of pregnancy, and so I really needed kind of something to cheer me up. I had my little Casey, and I was washing dishes one day in the home in Malibu, and suddenly the radio was over the sink, and I would listen to music and do housework like everybody else. And I was in the kitchen doing dishes one day, and I heard Higher and Higher on the radio, and it was right after a James Taylor huge hit song. So I went, oh my gosh, this could really be something. It could be. Yeah.
What a career. I know, you have for those of you who haven't read her book, Delta Lady, it's a great read. It's a fast read. It's like having a conversation with a girlfriend kind of read, isn't it? Like there's so many things about it that I could just so relate to. Cool. Yeah, and she was a cheerleader and all kinds of cute stuff about her in the book. And there's a lot of interesting stories about the men in your life, and that's part of your history and your past, and you wrote about it. One of those men who recently passed is Leon Russell. Do you want to talk a little bit about him? Elton John considered him his greatest musical influence, and he was a musical genius. And if you don't mind, share some of your thoughts about Leon.
Well, when we all got the news this past week that Leon had passed, he had heart surgery a few months ago and never really regained his strength. And I think the impact on, not just on the fans and the music people who buy records and know music, but Leon was a musician's musician. He was really somebody that influenced Leon Russell. I can't even tell you how many letters I got from people talking about Leon and talking about how his music had changed their lives, especially piano players, but also singers everywhere in the music world. It was such a blow. And Leonard Cohen had passed 2 days before Leon, and that was a tremendous blow to all of us. But I think that Leon, I think that there were so many tears were shed when Leon passed because he was such a powerful man. He had a gift. He was when he was born, when he was a young kid, he had polio, and so he kind of had an affliction in one leg and one hand didn't work as well as the other, and that's why he was always so great with his left hand, because he was struggling with the right hand. Not a lot of people knew about that because he played so well and just he really changed the world of music. And he was doing this in the 60s when, you know, the rest of us, or some of us, were in college. Leon was already on TV in California doing Shindig and some other shows, and he played with everybody. He played with everybody, even before I met him and before Mad Dogs and Englishmen and before I went to California with Leon. So it's been a blow. It's been a huge blow.
What a week we've had.
It has been. It's been an unbelievable week.
Yeah, it's a strange energy. Great story about the song Layla. Do you guys know the backstory of Layla? Because I want Rita to tell this story. It's really quite extraordinary. The Eric Clapton song I'm referring to.
Well, this is a chapter in the book. I think Leon has a chapter or close to one.
Yes.
And when she talks about, I wanted to clarify, when she talks about the men in my life, this book ends when I divorced my ex-husband, Kristofferson, and that's kind of when the men stopped too. So it's when it's when I was young. I just need to clear that up.
I didn't mean to make that Lucy.
Well, when I wrote the book, I really didn't want it to be a tell-all book, but I told enough. In the 1969, late 60s, I was working with Delaney and Bonnie Bramlett with their band Delaney and Bonnie and Friends, and we were touring in England. I had written a song with the drummer in the band, Jim Gordon, and it was a song called Time. And it's a song that Priscilla recorded with her husband, Booker T. Jones. And it was a song that Jim came over to my house one day in Hollywood earlier that year and kind of played a couple of chords and said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, I think we should write a song." So we did, and we wrote.
You guys know who Jim is, right?
Jim Gordon was, he was the drummer in California in the 60s and 70s until he also suffered severely from paranoid schizophrenia, and he murdered his mother, and he spent his whole life in prison in psychiatric ward and refuses to take meds, so he'll be there for the rest of his life. But at one point he was a wonderful human being before the disease took over. And we had written this song called Time, and we were in the studio in England with Eric Clapton working on his first solo album a few months later, and played this song Time and left a cassette for him. I sat at the piano and sang it and played it, and Eric seemed to like it, and so we just left it, and I thought, well, if he likes it, he'll record it. And nothing ever came of it that I knew. And then he formed another band from some of the people that played with Delaney and Bonnie, and that band was Derek and the Dominoes. And Eric recorded this song called Layla, and I was in the studio having my picture made following the release of my first record. And all of a sudden, over the speakers in the studio, I hear this music that is so very familiar to me, and I realized that it was the music, the beginning of Layla. It's called the coda. It's played in the beginning and at the end. Was actually the song that Jim and I had written, and I was thrilled, and I ran to Tower Records to see if my name might be on the credits, and surprisingly, it was not.
But his was.
Oh, well, it was Eric Clapton at that. Yeah, Eric Clapton and Jim Gordon.
Right.
So it's a story, and so many people have said, "Why haven't you told this story before?" I've been telling this story since the day it happened because I called the management, Eric Clapton's management, who was this man Robert Stigwood, whom we all call Stiggy, and explained to him that I had written the song, that I was a writer on the music, and he said, "Well, what are you going to do? You're just a girl. You're going to go up against Stiggy and his deep pockets." And I thought maybe I could, and then I was advised later that there was no amount of money was going to be able to get what was mine. So I just tell my story and keep grinning. You know, I think my peace of mind came when I realized a couple of decades ago, because I was so angry about it for so long, when I had spent some time with Jim Gordon's little girl, Amy, and when I really sat down and thought about it and thought that she had really lost her father forever, and what a horrible legacy to have, and that there was something that would be going to her from her dad, which were the royalties from Layla, and then it made everything okay.
You're pretty good at this. So can we talk? I know you have a wonderful, sweet man in your life, and I don't ever want to diminish that, but can we talk a little about Kris Kristofferson? That's not off territory, right? Because you write about him in the book, and how madly in love you were, and how great the music was you guys made together. That was a really, I mean, who of us don't remember that? Can you talk a little bit about Kris and how you met and that whole experience?
Well, Kris and I met at LAX, at Los Angeles Airport. I was on my way to Memphis to rehearse with my first band, the Dixie Flyers, and Leon and Kris. They all run together. Kris was on his way to Nashville to do the cover story for Look magazine, and we sat together on the plane, and when we got to Memphis, he got off and went to Nashville the next day. And we just pretty much became a couple from that day on, and he actually had just broken up with an actress by the name of Samantha Eggar, and he was definitely not looking for somebody to, but when he, it happened anyway. And we did have a wonderful musical relationship, and for a few years we had a great marriage, because he was one of the funniest people I ever knew. And I think that the demands of movies and his alcoholism was just running rampant. He would get up in the morning and drink what he called a dirty sock, which was vodka and grapefruit juice, and he would drink all day long, and it just became very hard. And I left the marriage, and that's when he decided that he'd get sober and wanted to make it work, but it was too late. But we did make some wonderful music together, and we have a daughter, Casey, who lives in Asheville, North Carolina, and she's a dance teacher and a ballet dancer, and she's wonderful. And Kris remarried and has 5 children from the current marriage. They're all big kids too. And he just, he's a national treasure.
Yeah, and you should see the daughter. I mean, the 2 best looking people in the world have a baby. So need I say more? Let's talk a little bit too about the Graham Nash and the Stephen Stills. Again, it's in the book, so I'm
It
not
is in
being
the book.
Daily News here. and that extraordinary story of what happened there.
Well, I've always been blamed, and mostly I think this myth was perpetuated by
She's the real
David
Yoko.
Crosby. Yeah, no. That I was the reason that Crosby, Stills, and Nash broke up, when in fact they never did break up. Actually, I think if they broke up forever, it happened about probably in around April of this year when Graham published a book, and David Crosby just said there's not a word of truth in the book, and I believe there is because I was around at that time. Because I don't think David doesn't look real good in Graham's book. But I was singing at a background session with Stephen Stills' song "Love the One You're With." My sister Priscilla was there, Mama Cass, John Sebastian, Arnold McCullers, just a group of great people. And I had never met any of these people. I'd never met Crosby, Stills, or Nash. And that night in the studio, I noticed that Stephen was paying an awful lot of attention to me, and as Graham was too. And after the session, Graham said, "We're playing Universal Theater tomorrow night. Do you want to go?" And I went, "Yes, of course," because I loved the music. And so the next day, I called Stephen's house, as Graham had asked me to do, gave me the number, and I called, and Stephen Stills answered the phone and said, "Well, Graham is not taking you. He's going with somebody else." He said, "But I don't have a date, and I would love for you to go with me." And I was pretty disappointed, but I wanted to go to the concert, so I went with Stephen. And Graham never spoke to me that night. He actually gave me the cold shoulder and wasn't with anybody. And I found out later that Stephen had just manipulated the situation and told Graham that I had called and I couldn't make it with him, that I preferred to go with Stephen because that's really who I am. Hi, Stephen, you're cuter. I want to go with you. Yeah. He's a little shit is what he is. And I think I wrote that in the book too, because he's always been a little shit. He's a big shit now, though. But I have had some conversations with David, and I've tried to make him realize that the band didn't break up. So, but I did went out with Stephen a few times, and then always was interested in Graham because he was just such a lovely man. And we, at one point, went to Stephen and said, before we start this relationship, we're not going to do this behind your back. And Stephen just came out swinging. He was trying to kill Graham and didn't, thank God. So that's that story. But Graham is such a wonderful. He was just such a wonderful human being and had such integrity. And he was the only guy that was solid in that group for sure, to the point that the other guys in the band called him Daddy because he was consistent, he was dependable, charismatic, and he was wonderful. So he's a great man, great man.
Our house.
Now our house.
I know you guys want to ask a couple questions. We don't have a lot of time. Do you ever get tired of singing all your hits? Does it ever get boring?
No.
Never gets old?
No.
What's your favorite song? Got a favorite? No.
Probably of all the songs that it's not a hit, but when I recorded Amazing Grace in Cherokee, the first time I recorded it was with Walela, and since then I recorded it with the Cherokee Children's Choir in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. The voices of the Creator are these children. And then I recorded it on a Christmas album of mine and a live album of mine. And I think of all the songs that I do in concert when we're not doing a short show like last night, but when we're doing our long form, I think that it's the song that stays with people after the show. And so that's probably my favorite. Amazing Grace in Cherokee, and it's the national anthem when sung in Cherokee.
Well, this has been an honor, and of course, most of you or all of you know that Rita is here because she's receiving an award as champion of music from FestForums. So we have some fun footage that she'll get to see. on Monday, so come by Monday for that. I think we have time for a couple of questions.
Who was the pianist backing you up last night?
Oh, he's wonderful, isn't he? His name is J.T. John Thompson, and he's been with me for 22 years. He also plays with Bruce Hornsby and with Albert Lee and some other people, but he is absolutely my heart and soul in that band. Because we've been together so long, we just anticipate what we're going to do, and he's always such a joy. He's a joyful man when he's not playing piano, but when he plays, it just all comes through.
Very kind. Yes.
I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you. Your album, Anytime, Anywhere, saved me in the 70s. The very first devastating love life. And I played your record daily, every day, all day. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That's so sweet.
beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't think we can say anything after that.
Okay.
Does anyone want to share their love of Rita's music? Yes, well, let's give her a round of applause.
That's so sweet. Thank you.